when Brian Callahan, I think Brian Callahan comes off much like Ran Carthon came off. And to your point, I think they come across as likable individuals. Number one, the air in the building. I was there and talking to some folks around the franchise that it is certainly a lighter, more airy atmosphere than when Mike Vrabel was around. He certainly was a large presence and a figure that sort of like was a part of the environment there. And I think people are lighter and airier and moving around. And I think Ran came off in his introductory press conference last year as likable. And I think Brian Callahan comes off as very likable. I think getting emotional about Cincinnati stuff, we can get into that. I don't think we can read. I think we can read too much into sort of how he handled things. I think to your point, Amy Adams Strunk spoke for, I think I wrote down, it was between 90 seconds and 2 minutes. Very structured.
Oh, it was way longer than that. I mean, my God, it was so much longer than that. You're
I don't know about that.
She spoke for forever. It felt so long.
Well, I thought she and Rand did largely nothing, which again is totally fine. It's Brian Callahan's day, but neither one of them did much of anything in this situation. And again, it's just a press conference. We're going to get to the power structure of the Titans organization and what the new structure means for the team, for Brian Callahan, for Ran Carthon, for Amy Adams Strunk. We'll get to all of that because that's really the biggest news since the announcement of Brian Callahan on Monday night. The biggest piece of news is that we now have a very clear vision of what the Titans power structure is going to be. So we'll get to that a little bit later on. But otherwise, I don't have a problem with him. I don't want to say being sort of so different from Vrabel in the way he's thinking in-laws and the way he's approaching this stuff. I don't think that's. I don't know. There's different ways to be a good leader. I thought Vrabel was a very good leader when it came to.
Yeah, I don't think that says an indictment on him as a person or him as a coach. I just think that, like, as a decision maker, when you're writing the speech, do we really need all these names? Like, do we really need all these names? No, we don't need all these names.
You know what it felt like, honestly, and I, you're probably not wrong.
They needed that playoff music for the Oscars is what they needed.
Yeah, come on, move it along, Brian. No, I think
move it along. I mean, because everybody's there for the football stuff and understands his day and everything. I'm not trying to be a dick about it.
You're such a dick, man.
At some point, like, let's get to, like, we don't need to thank your dead cat. We don't need to thank the trash guy or anything. Like, let's move on.
Here's what it did feel like, and I think you can tell. There isn't a huge advantage to Brian Callahan being in a football family. Huge advantage. Just being around the game. He talked about learning things through osmosis, whether it's schematics in John Gruden's playroom, or how he communicates with players or coaches or peers or colleagues or fans or media. Like, it's clearly a huge advantage for a young person to have spent his entire life around the NFL. That's a huge advantage. You could tell, in my opinion, the reason he did that, this is just an assumption here, not having talked to anybody in the room or anything about it. It felt like I have worked my entire life to try to earn this on my own without my dad. And I finally got it. So now you guys are going to listen to my fucking list. is sort of how it felt. Yes, Easton, I will not explain what happened.
Fart in the elevator?
But the worst part of the event was our elevator ride up. You know what? Tune into the Hot Read podcast later on today, and maybe Easton will explain what happened. So that's
I'm just assuming one of you farted.
It's way worse.
Oh God! One of you shit yourselves?
That's unfortunately my dog here at home, who I got home and I had to clean it all up. So anyway, so I think the tone, and this is what you expected. Players, disciplinarian, ego guy. Although I do think Vrabel is far better at the psychology of leadership and caring about his players than people are going to give him credit for. Callahan certainly comes off as the pendulum swing to the other direction, which is just sort of analytical and thoughtful and nuanced and certainly lighter to approach. But I think I'm curious if this is what you're talking about what you picked up on. There's an element of being an NFL head football coach where you need a little bit of that Vrabel ego. You kind of do. And I don't know, maybe
everybody has ego.
Everybody has it. And maybe in 2024, you don't need as much of it. Maybe that's what's happening to football, to the NFL.
They just display it differently.
But to your point about watching the Bobby Slowick stuff and how it didn't come off like you weren't inspired.
Yeah,
I think it's
like Amy Adams Strunk level of like boringness.
When you swing the pendulum back the other direction, though, you expect it to feel pretty drastic. And I think in the room, it is a drastically different energy. And the question is how different is that for the players? And if it's not, he still has a little bit of that, like, and he said it today. He said, look, sometimes you got to, and I'm going to paraphrase here, you got to crack the whip sometimes. You got to know when you got to be more colorful and more explosive with your commentary and be more constructive with your feedback, that kind of stuff. But I don't, we'll see. We'll see. I don't think any fan should take anything from, hey, he's really brilliant at, being a football coach because he got emotional about the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't think there is a through line or a connection to any of that stuff.
No, that has nothing to do with coaching.
Yeah.
The whole thinking and getting emotional has nothing to do with coaching, which is why I was a little peeved that people kept bringing it back to that when the media started asking questions. Hey, no, you don't want to get you a little emotional, but here's a fucking emotional question. Then it rattled off 3 to 4 really bad questions from the media, and I was just dying on the inside because
it was a different room.
Good.
It was a different room.
Good at talking about football and explaining nuances and giving you details. And everybody's like, well, explain what the conversation was like with your dad. Unless the conversation with his dad is about requesting permission to interview him, at that point, you should not care. He already told you.
Okay, I agree with you. I'm going to say this because there's no point I'm not going to be rude about this. It was a different room than normal, because it's an introductory press conference. There were faces that are there that are not normally there. And it was a little different just in general than the press conferences I've been to before. There's a couple of new faces, and those questions came from some new faces, and that's okay. It's just different. And so the folks that were asking the main key pieces of the Tennessee Titans media core were the ones that asked the good questions. And I could rattle off the names, but you guys
PK
know.
When he asked the 3-4 question, that was a silly question.
That was multiple.
That was the
one
bad question from on the football. When every other football question I thought was really good, but that was the one bad football related question that was I can't believe PK asked it, because I'm pretty sure I've heard him on the radio say, hey, you shouldn't get wrapped up at 3-4, 4-3 because it's all multiple anyway. And I'm like, well, why did he even ask that question?
Well, and sometimes you ask questions to specifically get a yes no answer, and that one's not one that you would want a yes no answer on. Sometimes you do have to ask the question to try to get a specific yes no and then move on. Normally you want to ask open ended. The only one that I would have asked, and honestly didn't feel like the right place, is about sort of what has he learned through his career, because he's got this lifetime of football knowledge. What has he learned to this point about how much a head coach can influence the overall health of your roster? That is something I would like to know about how he sees what strategies as a head coach can you implement or not implement to affect.
I was a little surprised that question didn't get
to affect the injuries. There. That was the only one that I thought, hey, if it kept going, they eventually cut us off, but that's the only one. It's also, we got lots of time for that question. As he said today, there's lots of time for the X's and O's stuff, lots of time to go a little deeper into the nuances of the stuff. But I think the casual fan that's tuning in is going to really like him, that he's more approachable from a media standpoint, which is going to mean more transparency. And I think somebody in the comments said it doesn't look like he wants to punch everybody in the face, which, yes, Mike Vrabel is a very intimidating personality. But there's more than one way to skin a cat and win in the NFL. And so we shall see about.
Well, you're going to get a lot of details from him. It sounds like you know how you had to ask the perfect question to Mike Vrabel, because you've talked about this on the show. You have to ask the perfect question to get really Mike Vrabel talking.
Yep.
And I feel like with Callahan, you're going to ask a question. He's actually going to give you a smart, detailed answer, even if you weren't really looking for a smart, detailed answer. And I think that would be the big difference between him and Vrabel. Specifically, I think, again, the biggest difference to me is that, I thought that he had a lot of answers to questions that didn't come off as coach speak, because Vrabel was really good about coach speak, and it drives everybody nuts, and a lot of coaches are. It's not, but we're comparing Callahan to Vrabel. But when they asked about, what are you looking for in defensive coordinator traits, this or that, he said, I think about what has been hard on me, what defenses have made it hard on me to scheme from an offensive coordinator point of view. That's what I want. I want And that explains why he's going to the Ravens, right? He plays the Ravens, played against Mike McDonald now 4 times. If you include two last year, 2 this year. And he's getting a guy that has learned the Mike McDonald under Mike McDonald. So, like, that makes sense, right? Like, I like that. To me, that's like tangible proof. Like, this guy is thinking on a higher, he's communicating at least that he is thinking on a higher level than maybe previous coaches that we have seen in the past. And I think that's to be expected from an offensive minded head coach. I just thought that was really good. I also thought the way that he talked about analytics is just finally, like, I have a guy that I know that if I write an article and I'm looking, because I got all these pieces of paper on analytics right now about the Cincinnati Bengals right in front of me. I am going from, I got 2019 all the way to 2023. I'm sorting through the data and I'm thinking, okay, well, I have the data. That means I can pretty accurately predict what this offense is going to look like once I amass all this data together. And he's like, it's black and white. There is no feelings. Like, how Vrabel we talked about is like, oh, well, it's just a supplement. No, this is black and white information. It's science, it's math. And he's viewing it that way, and he's going to use it a lot. It's maybe not going to dictate every decision that they make. But when you talk about it's going to be used way, way more than what Vrabel did. Like, there was a bump from when John Robinson left to the analytics, and now there's going to be a big jump up.
Well, and what he said, and I think I put out the quote on my account, which is basically yes, I because the question about analytics was asked about across the board, scouting, scheme, game plan, in-game decisions was the question, I think from Paul actually, and ultimately the quote was basically, and I'm kind of sort of, here you go. You're using hard, concrete data to inform decision making. The more you have, the better your decisions. I believe in it. They are important. But he didn't say it's the only thing, though, which, again, most smart coaches say it's definitely a huge piece of our decision making process. And the more information we have, the better our decisions can be. But most
coaches say that.
You still have to make. Sometimes your decision might go against the analytics still, is what I heard there. So he gave himself room to say, look, this is about giving ourselves as much information as possible to make as informed a decision as possible. Sometimes we'll go right along with it. Occasionally we might not, but it's about acquiring as much information as possible. And so, I think, look, the relationship, the chemistry, I think Amy Adams Strunk said this, it was all about the chemistry between Ran Carthon and Brian Callahan. And we'll get into the power structure in a second. Because I think the whole final say and collaboration, I think it's a little overblown, because if you're not working together, it's going to fail no matter who has final say ultimately. But the vibes, right? The vibes are there for everybody. So, I mean, it was very, very vibe heavy when it comes to why the relationship came together.
The trait for the wide receiver was interesting. The first thing that he said was selfless. And that just was another way to say, you're not always going to get the ball, but you're also going to have to run block. I just thought it's just funny. Listen, all your wide receivers have to run block, but for him, it's like selfless in a different way, getting yourself down the field so someone else can get open. That wide receiver room has done. I mean, he also said big, strong, fast, which is not so different than what the Titans have generally gone with, but I think that the fast part is probably going to play a little bit more.
Don't you talk about NWI that way. Don't you talk about NWI that way.
And then he wants the players that he wants to make the team resilient and relentless. And I thought those were really good adjectives to use to describe what you're looking for, because he talks about his own resiliency and the resiliency of the entire team of the Cincinnati Bengals during the dark days, which was a great question by Nick Suss. But he talks about that because right now, Tennessee Titans are likely coming out of a dark day and maybe not going to see a lot of light in 2024. We'll see what the roster looks like and the coaching staff looks like, but there's could be a good chance that there is a 2019 Bengals-esque season on the horizon, and that everybody's going to have to be patient, that it's going to take time to get where everybody wants to be, and that is sustained excellence, which is a direct jab at what Mike Vrabel has done the last 2 years.
I thought the quote of Jurgen Klopp, of course, which is a famed soccer coach, won over a lot of the press corps. The fact that
I'm sure
the fact there's a bunch
that
of
probably
giant,
was the only thing they were like, "Oh, this guy's it."
the super nerds. There's a lot of soccer fans that work for the Titans and work in the media corps for the Titans, so they love the Jurgen Klopp reference there. The quote, who's a Liverpool coach, very very famous European soccer coach. But basically, all the buzzwords, man. I don't think I want to talk more about like what I believe Callahan and Carthon can do together than almost, unless you've got, I do, Square Up says hunting at the same time isn't the same as hunting together. Under Brian Callahan, we will hunt together. I think that's an interesting analogy. I think that's smart. I mean, that's like any good.
It's a shot. We can call it like it is. It's a shot.
I think that's fair. So Daniel says the Klopp quote was the best part of the entire presser. Look, I'm surprised as many people kind of agree with you, because I felt a similar way that, like, okay, I think this guy knows football. I think he's been around the game, and I think Titans fans have lots of reasons to be excited about him being the head coach of the team. But like, does this guy exude like, I'm gonna like what was the movie 300? Like, I'm gonna like remember the Alamo shit. Like that's what Vrabel exuded. And certain guys exude, and he does not. And that does not mean he's not going to be a great football coach. Matt LaFleur has none of that shit.
Well, it also doesn't mean that he doesn't exude that in the meeting rooms or on the field at practices yet. Right. I mean, I don't think that Vrabel was particularly exuded that from his pressers. I think he exuded that in other ways. So maybe that'll be the same for Brian Callahan. But I also don't need that, right? Like, I don't need the,
it's not important. Yeah.
I don't need. Yeah. I mean, like, it's just really not that important. And if that's I feel like this. I think it was Vrabel last year after the draft said, like, the draft's your best night, then you did not have a good career in the NFL or something to that effect. And I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
But that also makes me think, like, if that's your best feature, you're probably not going to be a sustainable long-term head coach. So there's just so much that goes into it. I thought the stuff about him shutting down the question pretty quick or putting to doubts, like, are you worried about, play calling duties and blah, blah, blah. And he was just like quick with it. He's like, no, I'm prepared. And he is, right? Like,
that's why you hired him.
You spend 5 years next to a non-play calling offensive coordinator turned play calling head coach. You pick up on stuff. He's been around his dad, who's been an offensive coordinator and a head coach. You just pick up on stuff, I mean, along your way. So it was never a necessity for me when the coaches were coming through. But as far as being concerned about it, I don't see any reason to be concerned.
No,
doesn't mean he's a good play caller or anything, but I mean,
right. It's to me, the only thing you can evaluate right now is the strategy, and the strategy is to hire a young up and coming offensive mind who is a young play caller who grew up in the game and is ready to take his turn at the wheel. And that's what you hired. And that is the whole, like, the most important thing we learned today is that he is going to call plays. Like, that is we can learn a lot of other things, but I think to me that is what I wanted to hear in that answer was, yes, this is why I want to be here. Is I have learned, I understand offenses. I have certain philosophies that I want to bring, but I've learned from elite level quarterbacks and explaining the quarterbacks and how different quarterbacks need different types of scheme and different types of approaches. All good, smart stuff. Put players in the position to succeed. Most coaches say all this stuff at the press conference, but like with him, because Peyton Manning and Matt Stafford and Joe Burrow are so different and Derek Carr are so different, and to have had success with all those guys, I think speaks to his ability to adapt to his personnel. With Will Levis, I think it's far more Matt Stafford than it is Peyton Manning. He did say he wants a lot of high completion percentages, which I thought was interesting. Well,
he also said stuff about route spacing and stuff like that, which will help that.
Yes, that's true.
To me, it's about I thought I thought that's what I was going to get at, was that I thought that his answer about protection, the holistic point of view of it all, was so refreshing. And it's so true. It's stuff that we have talked about on Football and Other F Words before. I've written about it, is that even if you have a bad offensive line, There are ways that other players can mitigate the bad offensive line. And the Tennessee Titans last year did not do that. And we have seen, maybe it's just Joe Burrow magic, but we saw Jake Browning do it. We have seen them mitigate a bad offensive line with both Joe Burrow and Jake Browning to put up points and to win games. Now, does not mean that you can ignore offensive line. And I'm kind of I'm kind of under the thought process or thought logic train, whatever you want to call it, that he's coming from a team that has had a terrible offensive line, but an all-pro top-tier quarterback and top-tier weapons to a team that has the bad offensive line and none of that. I think offensive line is going to be a pretty big priority. Yeah. Now, if you get Bill Callahan or Mike Munchak, maybe it's a different looking kind of priority. Maybe they look at Jalen Duncan as a right tackle. Bill Callahan comes in, watches tape, meets his guys, and he's like, well, I can do this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. I can at least get to starting level for average. And then we draft a guy, go next to Peter Skoronski, and I think we're good. Get us a center, and I think we're fine.
Yeah.
Like, so that's, to me, is what Bill Callahan brings to you, is that maybe not every resource you have has to go to offensive line. If you get Bill Callahan or Mike Munchak, maybe less resources are put into the offensive line.
Yes, there were two reports out of Cleveland, one saying that Bill Callahan is interested and will expect it to be coming to the Titans. One said he's not. Mary Kay Cabot, who is very well sourced up there, said that she expects it to happen. Obviously, they could not say anything about it today. What I wrote down when he said that about protection was he called protection of the quarterback a holistic offensive problem. And he talked about receivers having to win one-on-ones. I don't think the Titans have had a quarterback, frankly, to beat that type of pressure. Honestly, I think they might have it now, and I think the quarterback is the trigger person has to be the first solution. You got to see it, you got to get out of bad plays, and you got to get rid of the football fast. And that's just not Tannehill's strength. And Will Levis is going to have to show us that he can do that, because right now they don't have a lot of guys who can win one-on-ones outside of maybe DeAndre Hopkins. So, question here on, can Callahan improve Treylon Burks or Kyle Phillips' development? Only time will tell how granular he will be on individual personnel. But he's a quarterback by nature and an offensive guy, so I would hope so.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see I think we can read more into, once he has hired the offensive coordinator and hired the wide receiver coach, maybe we get some more insight. And I haven't dove deep into the 2019 personnel, but Kyle Phillips may be eliminated because they may not have use for a wide receiver of his size. So I don't know,
we'll see.
But there could be, when you look at the wide receivers at the San Francisco 49ers and the Cincinnati Bengals field, I can't think of a guy that is anything like Kyle Phillips that either of those teams have had. So I think when you're talking about,
is Tyler Boyd not a better version of that?
He's way bigger. He's
sure
actually tall and tall and thick, and he's old.
He's very old.
So he's not really your traditional slot guy like Kyle Phillips is. Like Kyle Phillips is like Wes Welker. You know, your smaller guys that can get open in short space, but they may have to have a need for it. It'll be interesting to see. Yeah. To me, it'll be interesting to see, once we have the staff in place, what that says about, like, because me and Stoney were already talking about, you hire a coach. Now, who benefits the most from that coach?
Oh, no.
What has that coach done in the past? Like, to me, it's like, Bill Callahan comes in, I bet he would say, well, I could do a lot more with Jalen Duncan than I can do with NPF.
I mean, I think actually they're probably very similar from an overall upside.
But I think from a Bill Callahan standpoint, I think that he's going to look at the guy that is completely more athletically talented than the guy that's a little bit slower and has gambling problems.
It wasn't a gambling. It was a gambling problem. Here's what I would say. I think the obvious answer is any young like Spears, Wiley, Okonkwo, Burks, Hopkins, Levis. That because here let's transition this to, I think there's two major things that I think Tennessee Titans fans should be genuinely excited about. And I say this as someone who's skeptical of firing Mike Vrabel to some degree, just because I'm skeptical of everything in general, and I'm a little more conservative on making moves. Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group first, though. Let me tell you guys about them. Sinkers Beverages. I am wearing a hat right here. It says Southern Grist. You can get Southern Grist beer at Sinkers Beverages. Uber Eats, search Sinkers Beverages, and have that booze delivered directly, Zach Lyons, to your house.
They drive so you can drink.
There you go. Back-to-back champions. Back-to-back champions in the city of Nashville, Sinkers Beverages. So make sure you check them out. Again, the bourbon selection, they've got more handles of good bourbon than anywhere I've found in the entire city. Maybe that says something about my habits than anything else. But they've got the handle of Elijah Craig, the handle of High West, the handle of Knob Creek. Like they've got handles of stuff that sometimes you don't find elsewhere. So you get good value there, great selection, huge beer fridge, great wine prices. Their champagne prices are like $3 better than any place I've ever shopped before. That's what my wife likes to drink, so go check it out. Also, Kingston Group, buildkg.com. I do think, and we'll get to transparency when we get to Ran, but here's the number one thing that I think Titans fans should be most excited about when it comes to Brian Callahan. And that is his essentially his offensive philosophy of, and he said this, and I tweeted it out. We're gonna be physical. We're gonna do he said the whole thing. He cleared his throat. And then he said, we're gonna run the football when we need to run the football.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, running the football when you need to is short yardage, goal line, maybe bad weather, and with a lead. It's situational. His commitment to the passing game and his overall theory, as he said more than one time, is the team that passes the football best wins the games. And having that philosophy to come into this Titans organization, even though he said, hey, it's the Titans' identity to be physical, we're going to run the football. He kind of tweaked it at the end and said, we're going to run the football when we need to. And that is
well, then he went on and said, he's like, basically he said, throw balance out the window. Whatever we have to do on Sunday, we're going to fucking do it. If we have to pass 50 times a game, we're going to pass 50 times a game. If that's the best way to win. If it's running the ball 50 times a game, we're going to. That's why Joe Mixon has been such a frustrating fantasy player to own, is because you don't know what they're going to do with Joe Mixon. Is this going to be the game where Joe Mixon gets like 4 touchdowns, or the game where he gets like 30 yards and 10 carries? Like, you just don't know what you're going to get out of Joe Mixon week to week.
He had a little sparkle in his eye when he was like, oh, we ran the ball when we needed to. He had a little, he cracked a little smile like, we're a passing team and we're going to throw it, and whoever throws it best. But when we need to run it, we're going to run it.
Yeah. Yeah. So to me, it's just like, it's a refreshing, because that he's not giving you the passer rating, win the turnover battle, establish the run game, and protect the quarterback. He's giving you way more insight, and it's refreshing. We still have to see it on paper, because, just a cursory glance of some of the numbers I'm looking at, they run on first downs at a high rate. That was early in the career of it. So I don't know where we stand in 2022 and 2023 yet, but it's like, they're pretty high on the first down run rate stuff. So, let's be careful here.
I think
you may get less run pass, and maybe run pass.
Well, and Joe Mixon, to your point, Joe Mixon is a very versatile player. He's a guy, and again, if you go back, I'm pulling up his stats just to make sure I've got this. He had 64 targets this year, 75 targets the year before that, 48 targets the year before that. He had 55 targets as a second-year player. He's had 4,000-yard seasons, but also over 50 catches multiple times. So this is not a Derrick Henry type of offense. Mixon is more of a Tajay Spears type of player, which frankly, Tajay Spears, I think, would have been an excellent player for the Tennessee Titans this year, no matter who they hired or if they kept Vrabel, to be honest with you. But I do think I think he actually is, to me, he's a little smaller, but I think he actually reminds me a lot of Joe Mixon, to be honest with you.
He's a lot like their other running back, like in terms of size, stature, ability, and Chase Brown.
Well, yeah,
the other running back there. Yeah. I think they're eerily similar, but it will definitely be Spears season plus whoever else. It will be a very you're gonna see a massive bump in 11 personnel usage. I can go ahead and tell you that. Is that last year they used They typically are around 76% personnel usage. Titans were at 69%. Doesn't that sound like that big of a difference? But it is a big difference when you factor in that they're much better at it than Tennessee Titans because they have wide receivers. And I think you're going to see a complete overhaul of the wide receiver room and all that kind of stuff.
I do think you need some veteran. I know a bunch of you guys have asked about coordinators.
This is about as good as my beard is ever going to look. I'm sorry.
Well, and his hair on top is better than my hair will ever look. So it just is what it is. That's why we balance each other out. No, I have seen a few comments about veteran coordinators. I do think he needs some veteran coordinating experience on the staff. I think that's fair. But getting back to the he who passes wins philosophy. I mean, I can't think of a single head coach in Titans history that probably has. I mean, Wisenhunt was an offensive guy and could call plays if he needed to, but like that's such an old school way, and he was just such a curmudgeon. I don't. This is the first time I can think of it in Titans history that they have a coach from this sort of lane of football. And I think that should be refreshing and exciting. It doesn't mean he's going to be great at play calling or that Will Levis is going to be great or that they're going to work great together and they're going to win games. But you should be excited about trying this strategy for the first time really in franchise history. And I think that's something you should be excited about. Just in general. So
Daniel says I think you're right on that. I think for the most part that if you're not excited about the football aspect of Brian Callahan coming out of the presser and what this next era of Titans fandom is going to be, then you're probably just never going to be happy. Like at this point, you're just never going to be happy if you are still pining for Mike Vrabel and saying that was the wrong move and that Brian Callahan will never be as good as Mike Vrabel. If you're still that person, you're just never going to be happy. I mean, like, you really got to, go see. I give you my wife's number. You can go see. She's a marriage and family counselor, and she can maybe repair whatever is ailing you mentally and emotionally because you're a sick individual at this point.
I will say I was listening to who was I listening to? I was listening to PK's show talking about with some people that were dogging on Tannehill, and like it does feel like, and I know the Titans haven't had good quarterbacks. It's basically McNair, Tannehill, and then like Mariota in the Titans era. So it's not like they've got a large pool to choose from here of elite quarterbacks.
Billy Volek, he's top 4.
Kerry Collins had a 13-win season. Like I know, but like it was funny. Like people just still shitting all over Ryan Tannehill, and like they were a very successful winning football team. It doesn't mean he's elite. It doesn't mean he's great. It doesn't mean he's a champion. But like, they were a fun team that won games more often than not. Like you could just say like, oh, he's not that great, but like he was pretty good for us and we had a good time and now it's time to move on. Like, it's okay. You don't have to like just shit on everybody. Like, oh, you're not Tom Brady? Fuck you. Like it can be more nuanced than that.
See what being in the modern NFL is like. It'll be very interesting. This is not my father's NFL is a fantastic statement. It hasn't been your father's NFL for about 9 years now, but at least maybe you guys are going to have like a real big jump start and get back. Maybe you can't get to 2024 in one season, but maybe you can get to at least like 2020 in terms of modern day offenses and stuff. But part of that is going to require coaching staff that also lives in a century. Right, that also lives in modern day. So going for it's not that great of an example, but maybe going for a Wink Martindale or James Betcher, guys who have had successful defenses before, but struggle with the new way to attack offenses successfully by being adaptable and flexible is not the way to go. And they are 2 seasoned veteran defensive coordinators. Like, who are the veteran defensive coordinators that are out there that is going to really scare Brian Callahan if he were to face them on the opposite side? There's probably not many, but
not with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase.
Yeah, but that's why you have to go.Maybe you're going to see names that you're probably not too familiar with. Denard Wilson was a very surprising name that I has no connection other than that we know of to Brian Callahan, but he has a connection to Ran Carthon. He does have a connection to Chris Harris too. But a guy like that, yeah, sure, he may not be a veteran defensive play caller, but he may be the right defensive coordinator. To me, it's about getting the right guy, not the most experienced guy.
Well, and I'm also okay with like a Thomas Brown and a Wilson as your coordinators if you're bringing in Bill Callahan and David Shaw and bringing experience in lower down on the ranks. Like you can bring experience in different forms. They don't have to be the coordinator necessarily. So I think having a mix is a smart idea.
Yeah, it's very important for me, and I think for the way this team wants to move forward into the next century is to get people that are flexible, adaptable, and are currently at a high rate and a high success rate, very successful at their staffing position. So obviously, even though Bill Callahan is very old, I can't remember how old he is, but even though that he's very old, he is obviously a guy that has adapted his coaching style, his way that he teaches, the way that he communicates with players to this modern age. He's been part of flexible offenses like the Cleveland Browns offense, and he's gone up against defenses. So that is someone that you bring in that's older but flexible and adaptable. Wink Martindale does not fit that.
So I agree. I agree.
Be careful by pigeonholing coordinators or coaches or as old guys, vets. We got to get the vets, and you got to be very careful because that doesn't fit. That does not fit with where the NFL is going necessarily, unless there's someone. Gosh, who would have been?
It's
probably
wisdom.
ahead of their time. Steve Spagnuolo. Steve Spagnuolo is a good example of a veteran defensive coordinator that changes up his looks and adapts to the situation, but he's not available. So you got it. Who's the next Steve Spagnuolo out there?
No, I don't. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. The staff will be fascinating. All right. So the other thing that I think is, again, that I would be excited about, and I think some of this is just maybe this is media brain. I'm not sure, but I truly am, because I'm so tired of the what did happen, who was this guy, who was that guy, this thing and that thing, and I've learned some stuff even today at the press conference about some of the decisions that were made on personnel and who gets more credit for that and this and who was in charge of this or that, and it's just it's so exhausting to relive it, and it's so much easier to just draw a line in the sand and focus forward. And I think that's what should be exciting about Titans fans now, is that this is all on Ran Carthon at this point. Mm-hmm. But so there's two ways to look at this, because it's all his show now. He is the top guy in the organization. Chad Brinker's not going to report to him, which is a little weird. And Carthon has final say on the coaching staff, which is it's a little weird. But by and large, this is a far more regular, normal GM, head coach, owner power structure. It's clear, it is defined, and the expectations now are very much on Ran Carthon, which I find to be refreshing and easy to deal with if I'm a fan. And here's the thing. Two ways to look at this. Number one, there's not a whole lot that he has done specifically that if I even asked him today and I said, hey, give me an example anecdotally off the record of something that was all you, he could probably tell me a player, and that would be something a GM would never do in theory. But what is it that we can definitively say that Ran Carthon did in his first year that was unequivocally the best thing? That was, we loved it, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I think he was far more involved in the DeAndre Hopkins move than anyone has given him credit for previously.
I do too.
I will throw that out there. But ultimately, the number one thing he has done to indicate future success is this process right here. Mm-hmm. The hiring of Bill Callahan is the first check mark on his ledger. You can look back and say some stuff was negative, or he didn't do this right, and he gets Arden Key, but Key wasn't really a starter, and Brunskill and the free agent class wasn't that great, but he didn't have a lot of money, and they didn't sign a lot of good play. We can go round and round and round on that. There's no real evidence that Ran Carthon is going to be an elite general manager outwardly. And frankly, some of this is his fault because he doesn't talk to us about any of this stuff. He could come out and sell himself if he wants to. And according to Brian Callahan, he is just absolutely lovely to chat with. Apparently,
He seems like it. I think I would love talking football with
I
Ran
agree.
Carthon.
I
I
think
think it'd be great.
I don't disagree. He's again his press conference introductory very
I
likable.
could see why those two get along very well.
Exactly. And I've talked to Ran on the sidelines during camp. He's a likable individual. He's a thoughtful guy. He's a likable individual. But there's nothing that I can like definitively say like he drafted this player. He chose that coach. He did. The first thing you can say about Ran Carthon is the hiring process we just watched. It was diverse. It was a wide net. They interviewed a bunch of candidates. They all seemed to be modernized and into his line of thinking. And they got the guy that seemed like the most logical and sound and best choice. I think that is the first time you can look at Ran Carthon and say, that's on you, and we all like it so far. Now, I want to be clear on this. I want to be very clear. I have not heard a single bad take from anyone in the media or any fans, really, about Brian Callahan. So if it goes south, we are all wrong. I mean, the radio hosts in this town are like celebrating on Twitter. I think it's absurd. It's ridiculous. Like I don't. It's okay to love your team and be excited about Brian Callahan, and also say, but we just don't know what's going to happen. We just don't know.
Yeah, we don't know, but I mean, I think you can. I think pedigree matters when you're talking about coaching, when you're talking about all this stuff. But I just think. I think the way that this system is set up with Ran Carthon, Chad Brinker, and Brian Callahan is the right move to make. Now, people have said, well, what has Ran Carthon done to earn total control and blah, blah, blah. Well, he's GM. I mean, let's just be honest. Most GMs in this league have total control of the roster. You know, the question you should be asking, what has Brian Callahan done to earn, total control over the roster? Because the guys who have total control of the roster are guys that have earned it in other spots or have been here for a long time or have, because everybody's saying that McVay has final say. I don't know if he's always had final say because Les Need had been there for forever before he got there. But at the end of the day, you can earn to have more final say. But at the end of the day, they're going to collaborate. They were not going into this collaboration anyway. It's not like Ran Carthon's going to be like John Robinson and go rogue on a bunch of different things. These guys are clearly on the same path.
And it may be terrible, but it may be great.
It may be terrible.
Right. It may be great.
I don't think it's going to be because I think that Ran Carthon, and I've said this since last year, he has the qualifications. He has the knowledge. He has the experience that you want in a GM. You just got to let him be GM. And they didn't do that last year. And they came out and they were culpable about it. In the pressers yesterday, Burke Nihill said that, we couldn't let that happen again. And we have to change stuff around. And I get why Chad Brinker is reporting to Amy Adams-Strunk. Because he's dealing with all this shit that has nothing to do with football. The only two things that he has that is really being dealt with football is the stuff that he was already doing. So he is working with Ran and saying, hey, man, I'm going to take all this other stuff off your plate. And I'll just bring that all to Amy Adams-Strunk, which is the right thing to do. Like, it's such the perfect power structure to me. If from a football standpoint of a guy that has believed in Rand's football acumen, and I believe in Chad Brinker's acumen to run a Fortune 500 business or 100 business. I think he did two of them, but
also very likable. Also a very likable guy to chat with as well.
Yeah.
So,
but they're doing what they should be doing. Yeah. Like, this is common sense to me.
And that's what I mean. Like, ultimately, I don't think coaches should have roster general manager roles. I'm okay. I don't care if Kyle Shanahan or this is ultimately why I'm fucking I've been driven so nuts by this. Who has final 53 and 48 and coaching staff? Like, I'm so done with that entire conversation because if you've reached the point where you guys are arguing about the 53rd player on the roster or the 48th active player or the 9th member of the coaching staff, it's not fucking working. It's not working. Like, it shouldn't matter who has ultimately you got two players and one guy has to decide who's the 53rd player and who's the 54th player. I understand that. And ultimately somebody has to decide. If you love two guys in the draft, we have a tough decision here. We both, but like ultimately you should get to if you are not on the same page most of the time, like it's not, it serves no purpose to argue. Like, I don't know. Like, does that make sense? I'm so done with the final say.
No, I'm with you,
like,
but
it's like, if you're
because
not,
there's also no proven method, right? There's no proven method of what actually works and what doesn't work. It didn't work with Bill Belichick. It does work with Kyle Shanahan. Okay,
but he's not the
there's
GM
1,000
though.
of times that it doesn't work, the other way, right? Like,
But he's not the
work
GM.
with Joe Doug, huh?
He's not the GM.
He's not
though.
the GM, but he has the final say. Is what I'm saying. He's
I don't care.
Everybody huh?
That's what I'm saying is I don't give a shit about like
I know that
last.
I'm agreeing with
thing.
you. Do you understand that I'm just agreed with you?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know why you're getting angry at me.
I'm not angry at you.
I'm providing evidence to further support your statement that it does not matter. It does not matter who has Final 53 because there is no proven method either way that works. What works is when everybody's on the same page when they're hunting together. That is what matters.
Yeah.
And that is what they are doing. And you should be encouraged that that's what they'll continue to do, because in the interviews, they naturally transition into these football building, trait discussing, and defining conversations in the first Zoom interview. That's how you know that they have a good working relationship. And that's all that matters. If they want to go crack beers, and get Ubers or whatever, that's whatever. I don't give a shit. If they want to have like family picnics and stuff like that, whatever. As long as they have a good football relationship, and that's what this is set up to do, then we're good to go. That's all that matters. Doesn't matter if Callahan had Final 53. It doesn't matter if Carthon does, as long as they're all on the same page. But I love that we have a clear defined power structure. And that's what we were told we were going to get, and we actually fucking got it.
And I'll say this, like Burke Nihill, he might take this as an insult. It's not meant as one at all. I think he's one of the best White House press secretaries I've ever seen. He should absolutely be the Jen Psaki of the Tennessee Titans at all times, because I do think that Ran and Amy, and we've had this conversation, it's not just a press conference media availability thing. It is, I think Ran would do himself some good, that if he's so personable and so good at communicating and so great at collaboration and hunting together and all these things that Brian Callahan said very clearly today, it was why he was hired as the general manager over a year ago, then you should, and again, I've spoken with him on the sidelines of practice and been like, oh, this is a very affable guy. Like, if all of that stuff is true, then you should just be able to come out and present a little bit more of what you're doing without giving away secrets here to your fans, and to answer questions about why you did this or why this was that or why this was this way. Or I think now that you're in complete control, it is such an easy win for him to just come out and be a little bit more available, answer a little bit more questions, give a little bit more insight into how analytics are going to be used with this or sports medicine that, or, whatever. Like, you can just, it's such an easy thing to do, especially if he's got all these skills as a brilliant relationship builder and communicator and all this other stuff.
He probably will, because he even said, hey, I sucked at that last year, and I could definitely be better at being more available in the media availability and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. Got to see it happen, right? Sure. But that is a guy that said that, hey, I could do something better, and hopefully he does it. So I think we'll see a little bit more of Ran. You're not going to see a lot of him. You're not going to see John Robinson levels of Ran Carthon.
No.
Because there are no John Robinson levels of John Robinson hardly anywhere across the NFL. It's very rare that you have a guy that loves the camera and loves to get out there and talk as much as he did. I did like
that he admitted mistakes, though. Like, that was a nice thing for someone to do. That was refreshing and honest. And hey, Kevin Dodd sucked. That was on me. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, at the end of the day, it's for me, yes, be a little bit more accountable in front of the media. But at the end of the day, his job is determined by the players that they sign, how they perform, the players that he drafts, and how they perform, and
Brian Callahan,
how the coaching staff performs.
Yeah, Brian, his entire future is now tied to Brian Callahan, probably.
Yep.
Which, again, I think if you're a Titans fan and you're excited about Callahan, then you should be excited that the guy who picked Callahan, the best thing on his resume so far as the Titans general manager is this coaching search. It is it's the best thing on his resume.
Brian Callahan even said, like, I was about to felt like I was going to have to make an impassioned plea before they offered me the job on Monday night. Like, he wanted to be here that bad because he loved working with Ran that much. I mean, like,
you just call Brian Callahan thirsty?
Carthon and stuff I've been trying to tell people is that I get that there was a very murky, bad free agency class, but a murky power structure and struggling, and then the team did not perform well. You know, Jim Wyatt even came out and said on Saturday, like, Andre Dillard's being signed and played is Mike Vrabel. Like, him playing was all Mike Vrabel. And, you know, stuff like that. And I understand that ultimately is also going to reflect bad on Ran. But there's a lot that has to do with Vrabel. There's a lot that has to do with Ran. We'll see where the chips lie in a better free agency class, a little bit more money, a better, deeper draft class. What can he do with some of the responsibilities of GM taken off his plate, like talking to the security guards, groundskeeper, whatever, and he's just solely focused on football. Let's see what the football guy can do when he's solely focused on football.
And to be clear, like, while it may matter if you're doing an autopsy, like, I do think this was a Ran versus Mike power struggle at the end of the day. It was, who's the future of the organization? Who's going to be best for the future of the organization? Well, Ran is now in charge of all of it. So it's clear that Amy went with Ran. But ultimately, there's still John Robinson, like, ripple effects here. Like, this is not, there's going to be Vrabel ripple effects and John Robinson ripple effects. Like, you still have draft classes. Like, what was the class with Des Fitzpatrick and Darrington Evans, and was that 2019?
2021.
Okay, I thought it was further back.
2021.
Either way, there's still draft classes where John Robinson, the Caleb Farley draft class is ultimately what I'm thinking.
2021.
2021. So that draft class was John Robinson. It was a lot of bad picks, and it's problems with the roster today. Into 24 with Brian Callahan and Ran Carthon. There's going to be Mike Vrabel players that were on this team that may be good or bad moving forward. Like, so it doesn't, you can't kind of grade him. Like we said, when a couple of weeks ago or a couple of shows ago, you have to start the evaluation of Ran Carthon now at this moment. And so far, most people are ecstatic with the job he's done hiring Brian Callahan. And I have not. I want to repeat this because I'm not the one saying it. So I'll be one with my hand up in the air too. There is not a single person who's like, I don't like this hire. Bad job. So if it ends up going that way, we all are going to be wrong together.
Yeah,
because we all agree.
Well, I do like about Brian Callahan, many people not know this, and I mentioned on Football and Other Efforts last night, is that he has a scouting, they kind of cross-train their coaches to also scout. So let's say they hired Denard Wilson. He was also a pro scout. Seems like you're going to have a lot of people with diverse backgrounds. If you know how I kind of feel that this whole staff's going to shake out, that are going to be able to do multiple things that maybe our previous staff was not adept at doing. Yeah. And maybe, talk about previous, you could probably do previous staffs all the way back to the Jeff Fisher era. But it sounds like to me that this staff, for this coaching staff, is going to have a diverse background of experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's smart. Was it Herndon though on your show that said that's because the Bengals are cheap as fuck?
Yeah. Hey, it doesn't matter if they're cheap as fuck. Just means it works, right? More
experience is good, but it doesn't mean you can't afford two people to do the job. You know, like, so.
Yeah,
it's kind of a little bit of everything. Look, again, very clear, like almost more clearly defined than we could have ever possibly imagined with the power structure. We now know like every single department and where they're all located, and you know, that press release was very, very long, but the big story after the hiring of Brian Callahan is the fact that this is exclusively now Ran Carthon's show, which again could be Super Bowl good. It just is what it is. Like, you have to evaluate it now and say it's Ran Carthon and Brian Callahan tied together. That was Amy Adams-Strunk's decision to move the franchise forward. There's a lot of things to like about it, but it's now time to evaluate it moving forward. And so
it's a clear move forward too.
I mean,
like, it's clearly we're going into a different direction. And I think the best way to describe it is not your father's Titans, not her father's Titans, not my father's Titans, nobody's daddy's Titans.
There was a well listened to podcast named name that this week. You should go check out.
There you go.
Football
and other F words.
Stacking the inbox.
Very long podcast.
Yes, it was. It was very lengthy.
But stay to the very end to hear the best and all-timer phrasing statement by Mike. One of those that makes you go, phrasing. Whoa.
Okay.
All-timer.
Right.
He's an all-timer right at the end.
I might have gotten to like an hour and like 20 minutes of it, and I still might not have gotten to that point.
No, you haven't. It's right before we exit.
Anyway, so Sinkers Beverages, the Kingston Group, buildkg.com, Sinkers Beverages. Search Uber Eats, of course, for Sinkers. They will deliver the booze directly to your house, Zach.
They'll drive so you can drink.
There you go. Stackingtheinbox.com. All kinds of stuff. And coming up next week on the show, Zach and Stoney, Sobro, F Words, a football show, all live from Mobile. Stay tuned. Turn on the YouTube notifications, the Facebook notifications. Turn on your Twitter.com notifications, all that good stuff. Make sure you got Zach and Stoney and all the different shows turned on because they're going to have content, I'm assuming, all day, every day across the board. So that's going to be brought to you by Bluegrass Beverages and Sinkers as well. So make sure you check those guys out next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. Maybe there's a new Titans head football coach down there walking around, checking out players. So lots of great Senior Bowl stuff for you guys coming up next week. So rate, review, subscribe. And if you're watching us somewhere else, Twitter or Facebook, give us a YouTube subscription. We'd really, really appreciate it. 440 Sports there. We do thank you for that. So other than that, I think we're good. Titans fans, reasons to be excited. Zach, I am Braden. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great weekend. Senior Bowl stuff coming up on Monday. Have a good one.